US President Donald Trump believes that the United States should not have gotten involved in Ukraine and should have just watched as Russia would have taken over the country. Trump made this statement before the Easter dinner at the White House, but there is more to this statement than just resentment. Trump, who claimed that he had already won the war against Iran several times, threatened to stop all arms supplies to Ukraine if Europe does not help him now to unblock the Hormuz Strait. The White House is threatening to suspend the priority procurement program for Ukraine, under which European countries purchase weapons from the US to transfer to Ukraine. As for the money that Europeans have already given to the US to buy weapons, Trump is threatening to simply take it and use it to fund the war against Iran. At the same time, US Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker stated that the American president is indeed reassessing Washington's involvement in NATO, and according to him, this reassessment could affect America's support for Ukraine. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like, write any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, US President Donald Trump believes that the United States should not have gotten involved, as he put it, in Ukraine. He made this statement while talking to journalists at the White House before the Easter lunch. Here is his quote. "We're spending billions. You know, we shouldn't have gotten involved in Ukraine. Ukraine is thousands of miles away from here across the ocean. But we helped them. We had a president, just a fool. He gave them $350 billion, getting nothing in return. He gave them so much money, spent so much ammunition. Now we're producing ammunition all over the country because we need it, because he gave so much to Ukraine and got nothing for it. But I'm selling them ammunition. The European Union is paying for that." I should note that even last year Donald Trump was using exactly this figure. Billions. Claiming that Zelensky supposedly made the US spend $350 billion on a war under Biden, a war that, as he put it, cannot be won. Trump criticized Europe, noting, quote, "They should at least do something, so let them at least pay for it. But everything we sold, we made it ourselves. And I just want to tell you, NATO treated us very badly. And you have to remember that." Well, what's funny here is that it's been over a year, and they still haven't been able to explain where exactly Donald Trump gets this figure of $350 billion from. Here's where it comes from. He keeps repeating it all the time, but no one has been able to explain where this $350 billion figure comes from. There was never even a number close to that. But Trump actually found himself in a desperate situation. No matter how much he boasts, his problems are very serious. That's why he gave an emergency address to the American people the day before about the war against Iran. And he admitted that yes, most Americans believe that he has no plan for this war. He hoped it would be like in Venezuela. It didn't work out, and he doesn't know what to do next. I made a separate episode on the emergency address. Check it out on the channel if you missed it. Donald Trump is shouting at the top of his lungs about how he's already won the war against Iran 5 times. But in fact, that's not true. He critically needs the help of allies, whom he has already managed to insult and humiliate more than once. But this hasn't led Trump to draw any conclusions. No, he's resorting to even greater blackmail. US President Donald Trump threatened to stop supplying weapons to Ukraine if Europe doesn't help unblock the Hormuz Strait. This was reported by the British newspaper Financial Times, citing 3 informed sources. According to them, the White House is threatening to suspend it. The Priority Procurement Program for Ukraine, the Purell program, is a program under which European countries purchase weapons from the US to transfer to Kyiv. And as the Washington Post previously reported, the Pentagon is also considering the possibility of redirecting important military equipment intended for the Ukrainian armed forces to the war with Iran. At the same time, the head of the US State Department, Marco Rubio, stated on March 28 that the US is allegedly not redirecting anything to the Middle East. The weapons already purchased by NATO countries for Ukraine, however, he did not rule out such a possibility in the future. But I would like to note that there was also a discussion, there was a request to Congress from the Pentagon to take the $750 million that the Europeans gave for the purchase of weapons for Ukraine and redirect them to buy weapons for Trump's war against Iran. The U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, stated today that the American president is indeed reassessing Washington's involvement in NATO, and according to him, this reassessment could affect America's support for Ukraine. Whitaker said this after NATO allies, most of whom are in Europe, rejected Trump's request for support in the military operation in the Hormuz Strait. Well, again, how can you call it a request? And Trump behaves as if everyone simply owes him. He says, "You owe me. You have to help me." Quote from Whitaker: "I think it's absolutely clear now that President Trump is evaluating and re-evaluating everything, whether it's our participation in NATO or our support for European efforts in Ukraine." A little later, Whitaker echoed comments made by other American officials who described NATO as a one-way street that only benefits Europe. Quote, "It should be a two-way street. There should be some benefits and advantages for the United States. Otherwise, we're just suckers who guarantee Europe's security without any reciprocity." Well, it's hard for me not to agree with the head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, who said that Trump's words about a potential withdrawal from NATO were very harsh. And such statements can only be beneficial to the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and similar figures. She said that Trump, of course, always acts like someone who is impatient with evil, with some kind of injustice and so on, but this never applies to issues related to Russia. Kallas's words were in response to a question about Russia allegedly helping Iran with intelligence data, and a journalist asked her why Americans tolerate such behavior from the Russians. It has already been proven that yes, the Russians are helping the Iranians with intelligence data, as a result of which the Americans are losing extremely expensive aircraft, but the Americans say it's no big deal. Well, so what if they helped a little? And here is what Kaja Kallas replied with, quote, "It's really hard to understand. This connection was very obvious. Considering that President Donald Trump is not a very patient person, for some reason his patience with the Russians seems to never run out." Kallas also commented on Trump's words that the Allies did not help the US in the war against Iran, and according to her, in the alliance. They did not understand the purpose of the American military operation at all, and no consultations were held with the Allies. And here I will quote Kaja Kallas, who, says exactly what I've been repeating for several days. Quote, "On the one hand, they say they don't need anyone. On the other hand, there is criticism about why others are not coming to help without any real requests. Such requests are not made through the media. Let me remind you that NATO previously stated that the US has not yet made any official request for assistance. There was no appeal, there was no request for consultations, nothing was official. All the requests are just statements by Donald Trump in the media and on social networks. That's all. There was no request. How can you demand something if you, don't ask for that help? And in Europe they say, so what do you want from us? Need help? Then request it officially. There are regulations, there are procedures. Submit an application, we'll consult, we'll discuss. Not the way you're doing it. And if you think that stopping aid to Ukraine will be connected to Iran, that's a mistake. I believe that Trump was just looking for a new excuse. Let me remind you of one episode. On March 4, 2025, Donald Trump ordered the suspension of military aid to Ukraine until the country's leadership demonstrates a commitment to peace. This happened a few days after Trump's argument with Ukrainian President Zelensky in the Oval Office of the White House. Next, I'll quote a White House statement from a year ago. President Trump made it clear that he is focused on peace. We need our partners to be committed as well. We are suspending and reviewing our assistance to make sure it contributes to solving the problem. That is, Donald Trump, is simply continuing his tactic of maximum pressure not on the aggressor, meaning Russia, but on the victim of the war, meaning Ukraine. It's just that now the pretext is a little different. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would be grateful. You can do this with any donation, paid subscription, or sponsorship using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support Pechiy's channel. Use any format you prefer. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.